Hello everyone! My mother, Grandmaster Pia Cramling, is right now playing in the Women's World Cup in Russia, and she immediately qualified to round number 2, where she got the very tough opponent, Polish Grandmaster Monika Soko. I am in this video going to be showing you an analysis of the second game of their match. I already did a video of the first game, so I'll put that in the description box down below. But I'm going to be showing you how the second game went, and I'm super excited about it. So let's go ahead and get this started and see how my mom did in that game. Okay, so in this second game, my mom was playing with the white pieces, and in the first game of the match, she played with the black pieces. So it's basically a two game match where the person that gets most points in those 2 games goes ahead and qualifies to the next round. So yeah, so this is a knockout tournament, and spoiler alert, spoiler, my mother drew the first game of the match. So shh, you didn't hear that. So what that means is that in this game she had to win to immediately qualify, draw to go to tie breaks, or if she lost then she was going home. So this is really a go big go home situation, although you could go medium and then go to tie breaks. But my mom was playing with the white pieces, and typically in chess many players prefer playing with the white pieces because you have a little bit more of initiative throughout the game. So my mother was trying to go for a win in this game, even though she was telling us how happy she was with the tiebreak and the fact that she was wanting to go to a tiebreak. But shh, that's another little secret. Anyways, she shouldn't be wanting to go for a win in this game anyways. My mom just loves the adrenaline that she gets from playing tiebreaks, which I just don't get. Anyways. My mom played d4 in this game. This is me and my mom, we play very similar openings. d4, knight f6 was played, c4, e6. And this is, when you go e6, what you're basically saying is that you want to get this bishop out pretty soon. So after knight c3 and bishop b4, we have a Nimzo Indian. This is what the opening is called. And the idea of the Nimzo Indian is, well, it's a very theoretical line when you play with the black pieces. The idea is basically that you get lots of piece play, even though you are kind of not taking control of the center too early on, like you're not going d5 or c5 or anything like that super early on. You're getting your pieces out, and you will break the center at some point with c5 or d5 typically. So that is kind of the idea of the Nimzo Indian, just kind of get your pieces out very early on. It's quite an active opening for black, and here there's many ways of respond as white, but my mom in this game, she opted to respond with e3. And when you go e3, basically what you're saying is that this bishop on c1 is going to stay here or go to d2, but quite quickly you're going to get your bishop out, typically to d3, you're going to get your piece, your knight out, you're going to castle. So it is a little bit of a more perhaps passive way, if you can put it that way, to go e3, but it's a very standard move, one of the most theoretical moves in the Nimzo Indian. So it's not one of the most active ones, to put it that way. Castles was played by black and knight f3 by my mom. d5, as I said before, black wants to break the center, and my mom here went for bishop d2, just saying, you know what, if you take this pawn on c4, I'll get my bishop out, I'll get it with the tempo, you get lots of center. That's not really something that black wants to do. And the issue is that black has this really bad bishop in the name, in this line. So what black typically wants to do is at some point they want to go b6 and bishop b7, just so that they can get the bishop on this diagonal. And that kind of works really well with this d5 idea, because the moment you have a bishop on b7, you are going to be able to you're perhaps going to be able to take you on c4 at some point and just get a very active bishop. So d5 is a very common move in this position. And bishop d2, just trying to get the bishop out, and rook e8 was played here. And the idea of going rook e8 is that typically at some point, it does look a little bit weird in a way that she's going for this instead of getting these pieces out, which seem to be the biggest thing. It seems like this is a little bit of an urgency, you get to get these pieces out. But rook e8 makes a lot of sense as well, because sometimes you do want to either push e5 or the rook just here is simply a little bit more active than what is on f8. Sometimes also you want to have this square for the bishop to go back to. So it is a pretty standard move to go rook e8 as well, I guess. But yeah. So rook c1 was played. Once again, where do you want to get your rooks, people? You want to get your rooks to semi-open files. Is this a semi-open file? Well, this is as close as semi-open file for a rook that you get. Also, pretty surprisingly that, you know, my mom is not getting this bishop out in castling, but instead she's kind of delaying the castle and first starting by getting the rook to c1. And the idea of that is actually quite clear. The idea of that is that my mom knows that Monica wants to go b6 and get this bishop out. So instead of going away with this bishop and going bishop d3 or going something else, she's actually going for a plan to kind of counter this b6 move, which we're gonna see now. So after b6, my mom went for c takes d5, and the reason why she went for c takes d5 here is because many times you want to do this right before the bishop has time to go to b7, because when you go b6, you're saying, you know, I'm gonna put this bishop on b7, but when you are forced to take with the pawn over here, then the bishop on b7 is blocked by a pawn. So there's not this potential of taking on c4 and opening up for the bishop diagonal anymore. There's just not that potential anymore. So it is quite common to take this pawn right when black decides what they're going to do with this bishop. And typically white doesn't do that earlier on, because in a standard position, a position like this, if you just take here, black will take with this pawn, and now the bishop will be able to get out this way. But after this move, the bishop can't really get out in this diagonal after pawn takes and pawn takes, because then these squares are going to get very, very weak. So it is a very, very, very common plan in these type of positions. And my mom opted for it. And now we can see that this rook on c1 is actually a bit annoying, because it's putting some pressure on c7 already now before the king is castled, which is quite interesting. Black here opted to go for knight e5. I am kidding. Let me do a little take back time. All right, let me say this again, everybody. And now white opted to go for knight e5. The idea of going knight e5 is that you're just centralizing your knight, but you're also not just that, but you're also saying, you know what, you're gonna have to wait with taking this knight out. You can't go knight c6. You can't really. You know, you can't really go knight d7, because actually if knight d7 at this point, there's knight c6 just trapping the queen. So it's actually a bit of an annoying move to go knight e5. You can't really eliminate that knight from there. Bishop b7 was played now, just so that there aren't any knight c6 ideas or anything. You can get your knight out. And now there were different approaches that my mom could take. There was both bishop b5 and bishop d3. In both lines, the bishop is typically gonna end up in d3. But you can, as white, say, you know what, I'm going to go bishop b5, forcing black to go c6, and then go bishop d3, and argue that this position is better for white than what this position is. That is favorable for white, that the pawn is on c6. You might argue that. Thing is, though, that even if the pawn is on c6, I mean, what black is always going to do is that they're going to go c5. So in a way, it doesn't really matter that much if the pawn is on c6 or on c7, because c5 is always going to be the main plan for black to break the center. Knight b7 was played here, just getting the knight out. And in this position, guys, do you take this on, or do you keep the tension on the board? You keep the tension on the board. Important stuff. Very common to just, I think many times we just think that, you know, you just want to start exchanging pieces. No, important to keep the pressure on the board. This knight is a lot better than this knight. This knight is a central knight. This knight is not really doing that much right now. You go f4. Idea is that if knight takes knight, pawn takes knight, this pawn, this central pawn, is going to become a huge pawn, and it's going to make sure that the knight can never stay on f6, which could lead to some kingside attack. Bishop takes c3 was played, and now bishop takes c3 was played. And the idea of that is that whenever c5 is played, white will have the opportunity of taking here and still keep the pressure on this diagonal and still hold on to this knight. So actually bishop takes is probably the best way to go. You don't really want to go pawn takes in this position, because this pawn is probably going to end up being a little bit of a weird pawn. It's also going to limit lots of white's pieces choices. You never really want to go c4 as white, because then you open up for this bishop. Bishop takes c3, knight takes e5, and f takes e5. This is what we're talking about. Knight e4, and already now we can see that white is slowly but surely just getting an extremely active position. Knight e4 seems like the knight is really, really good here, but, and it is black's best piece, but it's also a piece that can be eliminated pretty quickly if white wants to. But white doesn't want that because white wants to keep the bishop here. Castles was played, and now actually a very interesting move by black. Rook e6 was played at this point, and the idea is to start a little bit of a kingside attack and starting to annoy white's king by getting the rook either to h6 or to g6. And in this position, there were lots of different moves that white could opt for. White could go at this point for something like queen h5, which I thought was a really interesting move, to go queen h5, threatening the pawn on f7. And if we just look at that very quickly, after something like rook g6, which makes a lot of sense to defend over here, then there would be ideas of going queen f5, putting some more pressure on this pawn. And even after something like queen e8, you know, there are even sometimes you might not want to do this, but there are some type of ideas sometimes of going bishop b5 and trying to just ask the queen, what are you going to do with yourself? Right now there might be some c6, but I mean c6 at this point might weaken everything a little bit. Then you maybe can go back, and then you will be threatening to take this knight. So there are some really interesting tactical ideas in this position, and this is just a way to illustrate how quickly white can get some sort of attack. Idea with bishop b5 is that if queen takes bishop, there is actually just a checkmate in 2. So there are some really interesting ideas here. But my mom didn't go for queen h5. My mom instead went for this move, rook f4. And the idea of rook f4 is just to get the rook up, perhaps move it to the gh file, but most importantly to start getting all of these pieces looking towards f7. Queen e7 was played as a very normal standard move, just to get the queen out and put some defense on the f7 pawn. Queen g4, getting the queen out as well. Once again, there were lots of ideas in this position. Queen g4 is really interesting, but another move that's actually very interesting is to go at this point queen b3, and this is a move that my mother considered. And the idea of going here is that you are very fastly threatening to take this knight on e4. Let's say that black would do a random move and just kind of wait around. There are lots of ideas of taking this knight, and after d takes e4, to either get this rook up here and then start pushing for d5, or even perhaps for going for d5 immediately and getting all your pieces out. So there's lots of really interesting ideas in this position. Queen b3 was a really interesting move, just because of this knight exchange threat. But instead, queen g4 was played, going to the king side. Rook g6, kicking away the queen, and now the queen went to e2. And it is for this reason that perhaps queen b3 would have been a bit more interesting, because the queen is constantly getting kicked out on this side of the board. Rook f8 was played just to add some extra protection on f7, and at this point actually there is a very interesting move. I mean, rook cf1 is a very nice move, but just putting some more pressure on f7. But at this point there's actually this constant idea of perhaps going a3. And I think that this move is actually a very clever move, because what you're doing is that you're immediately threatening bishop b4, which is quite an active square for this bishop, or you would also be, you know, threatening this this pin over here. And it's quite interesting to do that right after rook f8, because then you're immediately asking, you know, black, why did you go there? I have this immediate threat. And this is an idea that we're going to see constantly in this game. Rook cf1 was played, and then at this point c5 was played. This is the breakthrough that we've been saying lots of times, so you know this is going to happen in this game. And at this point actually a3 is once again a very interesting idea, to be honest. Very interesting, because after a3 you're stopping black from going pawn takes d4. If pawn takes d4, then we just have bishop b4. Gonna win something over here, gonna win some material because of this pin. And if instead of c takes d4, black goes c4, then you can just take this one and then go bishop b4. So by going with this move a3, very interestingly, you're just limiting black's power of doing anything with the c5 pawn. And a5 is not really a move that you want to do, because then you're starting to weaken your queen side a bit. Sometimes you might look at taking over here, and then pawn can't take because this bishop can take this one, and it starts to get a bit messy. So a3 was a really interesting idea that, my mother just didn't spot. I mean, it looks like a very innocent move, but actually it's a really, really interesting one. And instead, bishop e1 was played. And the idea of bishop e1 is just to reroute the bishop to the other side of the board, to go bishop h4 with it. And this is also a really, really interesting idea. At this point, rook h6 was played just to avoid bishop h4. And at this point, there was a move that my mother said, that she considered, but she said that those are one of the type of moves that you consider, and deep down you think it's good, but you're just kind of taught that it just shouldn't be good, right? Like, it's just one of those moves that just look bad, but your intuition just says that it might be a good move. Especially if you've been watching a lot of AlphaZero. People, if I say AlphaZero, what move comes to mind? I'm giving you 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Alright, h4 here is actually a really interesting move. Idea of h4 is that g5 is never ever going to be possible. You're limiting black's chances of going g5. You're also limiting black's chances of at any point getting the knight or queen up to g5 and activating their pieces here. And actually with this bishop on e1, this pawn is going to be very protected, even though it might look a bit weak. Also because this rook on f1 and this rook on f4, they're just having a great time. They don't want to move from here, so very interesting move to go h4 at this position. And it was a move that my mom considered, but she didn't really go for that. Queen c2 was played instead. And the idea of queen c2, I think that at this point, I think that what happened was that my mother started like going around a little bit with the queen. I think that she didn't really, or actually I know that she didn't really know what to do. She couldn't really come up with any big plans at this point. This is also a part of the game where I think that she started feeling a bit stressed because she was like, I'm supposed to win this game because, well, I've been pressuring her and I have a great position, but I can't find the win. And when I started seeing these kind of queen moves, we're going to see that. But when I started seeing these kind of queen moves, when I saw this game live, I was like, okay, it feels like my mom maybe doesn't really know exactly what her plan is at this point. And this was something that she confirmed to me, a bit later, that right now she was just trying to move around a bit and see what Monica was doing, and that's also a really great practical plan. But I think it's really interesting that she was seeing these ideas of h4 and b3 and everything, but she just didn't really opt to go for them at this point because of the fact that she wasn't just that sure. But queen c2 is a nice move. I mean, the queen is well placed here. Threats are perhaps to put some extra pressure on e4, and yeah, if this rook moves, then you're threatening on h7. I think also that my mom wanted to go queen a4 at some point, which she did a bit later. You guys are going to see queen e6 and queen a4. Although when the queen started going onto this side of the board, even though the engine does like it, in a way, it is perhaps objectively good in a way, but at the same time, it feels a bit counterintuitive to bring your queen to the other side of the board when all of black's pieces are on this side of the board. So after a5, the queen started going to d1, and this is the point where she was thinking quite a lot, moving the queen around quite a lot, and it was quite clear that she didn't exactly know what her full plan was, which is something really common. It happens to everybody. And but it's a bit nerve-wracking when it happens in these type of situations, because it leads the player to start thinking more. And Monica here started playing really well. She's playing very fast, and she's playing these small little moves like bishop c6, bishop c3, rook g6, nothing big, no threats, queen e2, rook h6, no threats, but constantly playing these moves fast and just asking Pia, what are you gonna do? How are you gonna beat me? And practically that's a very good psychological thing to do, because it was working on it was working, my mom, she was thinking and she didn't really know what to do, and she kept getting a bit lower on time. Queen d1 was played. Instead, the queen moves are going back and forth. Rook g6, queen e2, rook h6, queen d1, and rook g6, and here they took a draw at this point. And it seems a little bit anticlimactic that this just ended in a draw like this. I think that for my mom it was really good, because I think that she was just not really in the place at that point to try to really push in that game. I think that she was she was getting a little bit not nervous. I think that just she said that she had slept really bad that night and she just couldn't really come up with any plan. So going for a draw here was really not a bad thing, and it led us to seeing some amazing tie breaks today, which, and I'm just gonna say this out loud, everybody, 3, 2, 1, spoiler alert, my mom won the tie breaks. My mom is going to the next round. So very interesting tie breaks. They drew the 25-minute games, and then she won the first 10-minute game. and she was completely lost in the second 10-minute game, but she managed to draw it. So tomorrow, everybody, my mother is going to be playing against Alexandra Kosteniuk in round number 3, and I will do a recap of that game right after it finishes so that you guys can see it right after that. But what we can get from this game is basically that it was a pretty short game, but it's interesting just how much potential there was in this game. Just by going back with all of these all of these queen b3 different ideas, queen h5 different ideas. There were lots of really cool ideas that unfortunately were never really able to happen, but still there were some really nice ideas that could have happened, and it was a really interesting game nonetheless, very interesting to follow, and a very well played game by both of the players who just decided to take a draw when that felt like the best result out of the situation. So everybody, I hope that you enjoyed this game a lot. I hope that you enjoyed, going through the recap with me and getting the analysis and everything. Hope you had a great time, and, I'll see you tomorrow. I am really hoping, I'm really rooting for my mom. It's been so much fun to see her play here, and I'm just so proud and happy for her that, that she got through this round and that she's going to the next one. I know that she's so happy, and yeah, so it's gonna be super fun to see her game against Alexandra Kosteniuk tomorrow. I will give you all the details on that right after. I'll go ahead and make a video. Hope you guys enjoy this a lot, and yeah, I will see you in the next one. Please tell me in the comments down below what you thought about this, and if you're liking this little series of Women's World Cup that I'm doing.